Hello and welcome to the Forum for the Bristol County District Attorney. I am Paul Santos, your moderator. We're coming to you from Dartmouth Town Hall. This tonight is a collaboration between DCTV, Dartmouth Community Television, Dartmouth Week, and radio station WBSM. Would like to remind people in our audience that you should refrain from talking and hold your applause till the end of the forum if you would. Would also like to let everyone know that the candidates will be on the state primary election ballot on Tuesday, September the 6th of 2022. Let's quickly go through the ground rules of tonight's debate. First of all, each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. The candidate in the first seat will go first, and we'll go back and forth like that. The first candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer the question from the panelists, and then there'll be one rebuttal from the opponent candidate, which will go about 1 minute and 30 seconds. The first question will then be answered by that candidate, and we'll move on down the line. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes also for a closing statement at the end of our forum. And I would also like to let you know that we did draw names at the beginning of the debate from a hat to determine who would go first and so forth. I'd like to remind everyone that's watching on YouTube that you can submit questions in the comment section, and we may, but not necessarily, use them if time permits. At this time, we'd like to introduce our panel if we could. First of all, Kate Robinson, news director at radio station WBSM, and also Christopher Shea, the editor of the Dartmouth Week. At this time, we'd like to introduce our candidates for the office of Bristol County District Attorney. First of all, the challenger, Attorney Shannon Mcmahon, and the incumbent, District Attorney Thomas Quinn. At this time, we would like to ask our candidates to present their opening statements, and we begin with the challenger, Shannon Mcmahon.
Thank you, and thank you to our hosts and those who are watching here and at home. My name is Shannon Mcmahon, candidate for District Attorney here in Bristol County. I'd like to take a few minutes and just tell you a little bit about myself and why I decided to run. I'm a lifelong Bristol County resident. I was born and raised in Swansea, Massachusetts, where I continue to reside. I am married to my husband, Brian, who is here with me today, and together we have 4 children. I've been in the legal profession for over 20 years. I started as a paralegal in 1999 until after the birth of my second child, when I decided to go to law school. I attended UMass Law, where I graduated top of my class. I worked my way through law school as a Superior Court judicial clerk, student teacher at UMass Law, all while raising my children. I am a dedicated, hard worker, and I have earned every step of my standing. I am eminently qualified for this position with an exceptionally well-rounded resume, having worked in the Superior Court as a judicial law clerk, then as a criminal defense attorney, then as an assistant district attorney, and now as a civil litigator. The decision to run against a deeply entrenched long-term incumbent with very deep pockets was not one I took lightly. However, I have observed the complacency, the lack of transparency, and the thousands of grant dollars left on the table for far too long. And I know I can do better. I know we can be safer. I can do these things by creating a full-time grant writing position funded by reallocating budget funds from a very top-heavy DA office, none of whom, by the way, reside in Bristol County. I will also use these grant dollars to reinvigorate our recovery court, establish a mental health court, as well as a veterans court, so that the men and women who have served our country can also be afforded an opportunity to rehabilitate. Being tough on crime is being smart on crime. Every single nonviolent offender we can rehabilitate is one person who will not reoffend. Let me be clear, though, I will go after our violent offenders and those trafficking in fentanyl, methamphetamine, and heroin. These people are killing our citizens and our children, and my office will prosecute them to the fullest.
Time, please.
Thank you for your questions. I look forward to answering them.
Mr. Quinn, your opening statement.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here in Dartmouth, my hometown, where I grew up and went to high school. Still have strong ties to the community in the South Coast area. I've been the district attorney for almost 8 years, and I've had a balanced approach to prosecution. I'm one of the few lawyers that has both prosecuted murder cases and defended them. In fact, I prosecuted a case in the next building over, the tragic murder of Jason Robinson almost 30 years ago. I'm very proud of my accomplishments as a district attorney. My priority has been to protect the public from dangerous and violent criminals. People have a right to feel safe in their communities. I'm very proud of our 95% homicide solve rate, well above the national average of 54%. Since I've been district attorney, it's been a 20% decrease in homicides in the county. Very proud of the convictions of Aaron Hernandez and Michelle Carter, two high-profile cases that were successfully prosecuted by our office that often does not happen in other jurisdictions when the prosecutions are not successful. Very proud of creating an elder fraud unit to protect our seniors from fraud and abuse. They've given so much to our communities and made them what they are. They deserve to be protected, and that's exactly what I've been doing. I started a rape kit initiative when we discovered that thousands of rape kits throughout the state had not been fully tested by the state lab. I am the only district attorney in the state to apply for and obtain a grant to fully test these cases by a private lab. By the end of the year, we'll have tested all of the cases in Bristol County, the only DA's office, over 1,100 rape kits. Women had a right to have these kits tested. The public had an expectation that they would, and we've solved several violent sexual assaults that would otherwise not have been solved. Started a cold case unit that solves murders and violent sexual assaults, including the case of a serious rapist. It's been a privilege to serve as district attorney. I look forward to your continued support. I've been about getting the job done, and I want to continue to fight for you.
Time, please, Mr. Quinn. Thank you. All right, let's go to the questions now, and we start with Dartmouth Week's Christopher Shea. And the first question will go to challenger Shannon Mcmahon.
With the U.S. Supreme Court ruling to return abortion rights to each individual state and the passage of abortion protection bills here, how would you handle a request from an outside state law enforcement organization requesting information or assistance in gathering evidence of abortion within the Commonwealth?
So I have been very clear about this. I have made public statements at least 3 times. I am pro-choice. I will never extradite a woman who comes into Massachusetts for an abortion, nor will I ever prosecute anyone who attempts to help or aid another with an abortion. My opponent, on the other hand, has not been so clear about his standing on this point. In fact, there was a petition for red and blue states alike for district attorneys across the country to sign vowing to do exactly what I just did. Say we will not extradite, we will not prosecute people who come to safe haven states for an abortion. My opponent failed to sign that petition.
All right, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you. The issue of abortion has absolutely nothing to do with the district attorney's office. I'm sworn to uphold the law. That's what I've done, and that's what I'll continue to do. The law in Massachusetts is very clear on this issue. In fact, they've just passed a statute, so no one is going to be extradited or prosecuted. This issue raised by my opponent shows the complete lack of substance that her campaign has and lack of understanding of the role and duties of a district attorney. So again, it has nothing to do with the office of the district attorney, and frankly just shows her a complete lack of understanding of this office.
All right, thank you. Let's go now to the second question of the night. It comes from WBSM's Kate Robinson, and we begin with the incumbent, Mr. Quinn.
What, in your opinion, is the biggest issue in the Massachusetts court system today, and how can the prosecutor's office help address it?
Well, in the short term, the biggest issue facing the court system is digging out from the backlog that has been caused by the COVID epidemic. Jury trials have been shut down. Initially, we're going back almost 2.5 years now to the pandemic. Jury trials were shut down for many months, and cases were put on hold. During that time, we fought to keep dangerous criminals in custody to protect the public and prevented the wholesale release of dangerous criminals. But during this past 2.5 years, our staff has been working diligently to be ready to prosecute these cases. I can tell you in the last year, last year, we have brought to trial 18 homicide cases in Bristol County, which is unheard of in my over 35 years in Bristol County. So I want to compliment my staff who has worked diligently through this very difficult pandemic to be ready for cases. Just a conviction today of a child being abused by a relative in the Superior Court. So through the hard work and dedication, it's focusing on moving these cases through the criminal justice system so all parties can have their day in court. And that's what we've been doing as an office, and we continue to move forward with these cases.
All right, Ms. McMahon.
Thank you. The first step in fixing any problem is admitting that there is one. We have a problem here in Bristol County, and it's not just the backlog, like my opponent says. We have major problems with the drug crisis, with gun violence, with abuse to our seniors, to our children, to our victims of domestic violence, to our victims of sexual assault. How do I plan on addressing this? Again, being tough on crime is being smart on crime. Every single nonviolent offender that we can rehabilitate is one more reoffender on the streets, which is why I plan on establishing a veterans court, reinvigorating the recovery court, and establishing a mental health court. And to be clear, again, we're talking about people who are nonviolent offenders. We can create a ton of, we can take a lot of the work off of the courts right now with the backlog if we do this. If we get the nonviolent offenders to rehabilitate and not reoffend, then we can go after the people who are trafficking methamphetamine, which is now on our streets, fentanyl, which is now on our streets, heroin, which is killing our children. That's the biggest problem that we have right now.
All right, the next question is going to be asked by Dartmouth Week's Christopher Shea, and it is going to be asked first to Ms. McMahon.
Doubling back to the backlog that the DA Quinn had brought up, even before COVID, it was still an issue. And how would you like to see, the office try and, clear this backlog, or what? Yeah.
Again, if we use grant dollars to reinvest in a recovery court, to get a mental health court and a veterans court for nonviolent offenders, we can remove them from the process while helping them. Then we go after the people who are trafficking. We go after the people who are shooting in the street. It feels like every single morning I turn on the news now, there's another shooting, there's another stabbing. Meanwhile, my opponent is going to tell you that they're doing a fantastic job. But in reality, crime's up. It's way up. Has anyone else listened to the news and heard stories after story after story about people being victimized in the street? Our neighborhoods are not safe right now. We can do something about this if we are smart about it. If we get people rehabilitated who can get help, we can go after the real bad guys.
Well, again, simply making inaccurate and false statements. I've made an effort to protect the public from dangerous criminals. We've used the dangerousness hearings to protect the public. It's been very successful. We've kept these people off the street, unlike in many other jurisdictions where there is mayhem and increased violence. To say crime is way up, again, this is an individual with very limited experience, less than 2 years in the district court. She said she's been in 19 years. I mean, that's simply not true. She's been apparently doing civil work for 5 years. Let me tell you what I did about the backlog. In the Superior Court, 3 or 4 years ago, it was very difficult at times to bring cases to trial. Not because of the district attorney's office, because the court didn't have the ability to hear the cases. I fought for a third trial session in Superior Court over the objection of members of the court system. Went to Boston, met with the trial court, fought for it, and got a third trial session. That started about 15 months before COVID. We brought cases to trial that weren't in a more timely fashion, that weren't being brought to trial. That's what I did to solve a problem. It was very effective. Bringing cases, child victims who's had their cases continued time and time again, the victim of sexual abuse, inflicting more anger. We got that the third trial session, first ever continuously in Bristol County. It's been a huge success. In fact, the chief judge said, thank God we have that to assist us in getting out of the backlog. I've done 5 wiretaps, court approved, to go after
Time, please,
fentanyl
Mr. Quinn.
traffickers. So, again, This is just completely inaccurate
Time,
information
please.
from somebody with no experience at all.
All right, our next question, it comes from WBSM's Kate Robinson to Mr. Quinn.
Lawmakers are discussing expanding the prison system in Massachusetts. Can current trends of prosecutions continue if the prison system is not expanded?
Well, I'm not sure. They're actually, I believe, closing Walpole State Prison. That's my understanding. The prison population in Massachusetts is the lowest in the country, or the second lowest. It's decreased over the last 7 or 8 years. The focus is on protecting society from the dangerous and violent criminals. The vast majority of people who come in contact with the criminal justice system are dealt with in an appropriate way. They're not threats to the community. In fact, I've involved in a pre-arraignment diversion program that's put in over 100 people into a drug treatment facility before even being arraigned. So Massachusetts is, again, the lowest in this country, or second lowest in people in custody. The people in custody are the most dangerous individuals who have committed very serious crimes, who are habitual criminals, and if you saw the records of some of these people, you would collapse. That's the primary function of a district attorney. What she's talking about, the recovery courts, they have recovery courts. They've had a recovery court for 20 years. For 20 years. The DA's office doesn't run courts. There's a separation of powers. We support the courts. They apply to only certain limited individuals that have to be accepted by the court. So what's being presented to you, it sounds like something that's been presented around the country that just results in lawlessness and chaos, and is not the job of a district attorney. But this is why my opponent has no experience and has been making things up to present to you as part of her campaign.
Mr.
But that's
McMahon?
what I've done
Oh,
to
sorry.
rectify the situation.
All right, Ms. McMahon.
Well, I would expect nothing less from my opponent about saying that I'm not qualified for this position. Again, to go back over it, I have worked as a Superior Court judicial clerk, criminal defense attorney, prosecutor, and now civil litigator. I am well-rounded. Working in the Superior Court as a judicial clerk taught me the value of equal and fair justice. The Massachusetts Rules of Professional Conduct identify the role of the district attorney as being the minister of justice, justice being key. I am more qualified because I believe in equal and fair justice, which my opponent has failed to do time and time and time again. And everyone here should ask themselves, based on his experience, based on his performance for the past 8 years, what is he qualified for? And as for your question about the prison system, my plan will actually prevent overcrowding in the prison system. Our plan will rehabilitate and will reduce recidivism. If we put more money into a recovery court, which my opponent knows very well that it does involve the DA's office because at once upon a time he funded it. We also need a veterans court. We also need a mental health court. These are courts that are in existence in every other county in Massachusetts. My opponent has failed to keep up with the times and still wants to live back when Michelle Carter and Aaron Hernandez was prosecuted.
That's the accomplishments of the office.
Next question now will be asked by Christopher Shea, addressed to Ms. McMahon.
What, if any, personal experiences have you had within the Massachusetts court system or correctional system that has changed your perspective? And if so, how has that perspective changed?
So, as a prosecutor, I was blessed to be the prosecutor for a recovery court. That was something that truly moved me, and I was able to see firsthand that this works. It just does. It absolutely works. It works far better than my opponent's idea of let's just, prosecute, put them in the House of Corrections for 3 to 6 months, let them come out and do the exact same crime again. It's almost like he gets paid on commission. But what I was able to see as a prosecutor for a recovery court is that treatment works. It just plain and simply does, which is why courts and counties all over the country utilize these courts to get treatment. This isn't rocket science. Additionally, now we've got post-COVID. Adolescents and young adults are suffering from mental health right now. It is an enormous problem. We can do better. We can be safer. And we can absolutely create a situation where maybe somebody commits a crime and maybe they don't have to commit a second one. Maybe we get them help.
All right, Mr. Quinn?
Yeah, I think the question was, what was her experience with the criminal justice system? And you may want to consider this as to her motivation for running. She resigned from the district attorney's office for less than 2 years because she was arrested for assaulting her husband in a domestic violence incident. Tuesday night, highly intoxicated, trying to frame him for assaulting her. He's on the line with the police calling, saying she's trying to make it seem like I assaulted her. Wouldn't cooperate with the police, threw out her name as assistant district attorney, a clear abuse and misuse of authority. Wouldn't cooperate with the police, refused medical treatment, invoked the name of a law enforcement friend to try to get her out of the incident. Now, people make mistakes, but that conduct is very clearly disturbing. And frankly, she was given the opportunity to resign or would have had to have been terminated. So again, that's just indicative of her motivation for running and her unfitness for this position. I don't want to go into detail. She's grotesquely exaggerating her qualifications. She was a criminal defense lawyer. I'm not aware of that. Very minimal experience in the criminal justice system, and using her authority, engaged in conduct that disqualifies her from being a district attorney. Not anything I did, because of what she did. And she wants to be the district attorney, making judgments about domestic violence victims and being fair and making decisions, people's livelihood. Just keep that in mind. You evaluate what she's saying.
Time's up,
most
Mr.
of
Quinn,
which
please.
is false and inaccurate.
All right, the next question will come from Kate Robinson for Mr. Quinn.
Do you believe law enforcement is being held accountable by investigators? What is being done or should be done about police brutality?
Well, I think it depends on each individual case. Police are public servants. If they engage in conduct that is inconsistent with their role as officers of the law, they should be held accountable. And I have held accountable police officers in this jurisdiction for engaging in criminal conduct outside of the law. So, again, it's important to look at each individual case, but police officers obviously have significant power and have to be held to a higher standard. But from my perspective, they're being held accountable. We've prosecuted police officers and throughout the county for various criminal matters, and will continue to do so if there is wrongdoing.
Ms. McMahon.
Thank you. I'd just like to take a moment and address what my opponent has so vividly talked about my leaving the office. Believe it or not, I've known him a while. I knew this would come up. And that
Hasn't
says
known me a
something
while.
about his character. That says something about his character. First off, my opponent was very well aware of a deeply personal situation that occurred when my husband was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Yes, we'd had wine. There was nobody who was drunk. And my opponent absolutely knows this. He was given medical records, so I'm not really sure why he's saying there was a failure to cooperate or get medical treatment since I was taken to the hospital. My opponent was given these medical records and refused to offer me a meeting. This is him using a personal trauma, a personal family trauma, for political gain. If you want to talk about experience or what you want from a district attorney, let's start with character. And how's that? In terms of the police brutality that does exist, I will first and foremost say our police officers do a fantastic job for the most part. But there are bad apples. There are bad cases where the police should be charged. My opponent likes to cover up for the police, including for his own personal gain. We talk about character. The man didn't even recuse
Time,
himself
please.
when he was investigating a
Time,
family
please, Ms.
friend.
McMahon.
You tried to frame your husband.
Excuse me, Mr. Quinn. Next question will be asked by Christopher Shea, and it'll be directed to Ms. McMahon.
When do you think it's appropriate or inappropriate to investigate elected officials?
Right now. That being said, in terms of investigating any elected official or police officer, my opinion is that if there is even a hint of conflict of interest, the district attorney's office should recuse themselves from said investigation. Again, with the Anthony Hardin shooting, my opponent didn't tell anyone that one of the police officers was a close personal family friend for decades of his. Didn't tell anyone. It was found out. And then he claimed, well, it didn't really matter because he wasn't the one who shot Anthony Hardin. Well, it was 50% of the evidence that you reviewed in order to make a decision that there was no wrongdoing. You didn't want to tell anyone that?
All right, Mr. Quinn.
Well, the matter that she is referring to regarding Anthony Hardin, he tried to murder a police officer who was there, officers there lawfully to effectuate an arrest for domestic violence. Officer fought for his life, and the other officer fired 2 shots. So to suggest that there's any impropriety or wrongdoing, this is the first time in my career of 34 years I have somebody question my character. Haven't heard that before. Coming from the opponent, again, who's grotesquely exaggerated her experience and just shows you she has no understanding how the criminal justice system works. And you know, it's really sad that she's making this presentation because she's talking about things that simply are not true and don't exist. I hold myself to a high standard, and I have lived up to that throughout my career. Like I said, this is the first time in my career I've had somebody say I lack integrity and character. I'm about doing the job fairly. I've been about pursuing justice for all my whole career. I just was approached by somebody the other day who I prosecuted years ago who said, you know what, I want to vote for you. How do I do that? Why did he do it? And I'm not making it up. He did that because he thought he got fair treatment. And that's what I've tried to be about my whole career. So to listen to this from a totally unqualified, unfit character.
Time, please.
Who's running most likely on revenge is tough to listen to.
All right, next question will be asked by Kate Robinson for Mr. Quinn.
What steps is the DA's office taking, or could the office take, to address recidivism and what's often called the revolving door?
Well, it depends what you mean by a revolving door. There are individuals who are habitual criminals who present a threat to society. I have focused on protecting vulnerable victims, women, children, the disabled, elderly, and that's what I've done. But some people have to be kept off the street and locked up because they cannot comply with the rules of society. They present a threat to the community. It's not the vast majority of people. In fact, it's a small segment. But there's not much that can be done about it. I have compassion and always had for the background that some people come from and have given people numerous considerations and breaks over the years. But in the end, individuals who continue on, who can't comply with the laws that threaten women and children, innocent civilians, have to be segregated from society if they continue to keep committing crimes. The lower level offenders can be dealt with via with probation. I've invested in many community programs dealing with drug addiction, with domestic violence presentations in the schools, many things designed to prevent people from committing crimes. So we've had a big community presence that's balanced, protecting the public from dangerous criminals. We've had 5 wiretaps that take high drug traffickers off the street. If people continue to sell fentanyl, so she's saying what she do, I've been doing it. 5 separate wiretaps breaking up large-scale drug organizations on people who are inflicting misery into our society. So it's a balanced approach. Low-level offenders you can deal with through probation and diversion, which I've done. Keep the dangerous people off the street. I haven't heard her once mention anything about victims or protecting the public, because that's what you're going to get. You're going to get people released back into the community to hurt people, especially women, in domestic violence cases. And she has no capacity to deal with that or any interest in it.
Mrs. McMahon?
I think that's absolutely just wrong. In fact, I have one of my platforms is to actually put more money into the Victim Witness Advocate program, because some of the victims that are out right now that have charges against their abusers pending have contacted me. And no, I'm not making that up. But yes, they've contacted me and they've said that we can't get anybody to help us. That's wrong. And the Victim Witness Advocate Program works way too hard. They're absolutely fantastic at what they do. But they need more help. They need more money. They need more bodies. In terms of the recidivism, though, that's basically my platform, is we can stop people from re-offending. We do it through putting more grant dollars, take it away from the top half of the DA's office right now, put it into the recovery court, put it into a mental health court, put it into a veterans court so we can get people to rehabilitate. And we stop that revolving door with just that.
Courts fund the courts.
Wait a minute, that's the end of that issue. Next question will come from Chris Shea, and that goes first to Ms. McMahon.
Continuing on, trying to stop violent crime and investigate that, the New Bedford highway killer still hasn't been identified after, committing all those atrocities back in 1988. What resources would you devote to trying to solve this case?
Solving the highway murder case. It's a good one. I know that there are some people who have investigated this for a very, very, very long time, and I would listen to those people. None of those people currently work in the DA's office, but I do know that there is a very, very big interest in that case, and obviously we would all like to see it solved, and I would take anybody who had any information regarding those crimes.
All right, Mr. Quinn?
There's somebody sitting right there, the deputy DA, who spent hours investigating those crimes. So again, another false statement, lack of understanding or a capacity to address the issue. I focused on solving cold cases. We haven't given up on that case. We're reviewing almost 50 years of unsolved homicides, which we have solved several homicides in the last several years due to the efforts of that unit headed by Deputy DA Bill McCauley. We've solved violent sexual assaults. We solved the case of a violent serial rapist who terrorized women in Taunton, Easton, and 2 adjoining counties in the late 90s. Some of the most brutal cases I've ever seen. But by paying for and utilizing familial DNA with our cold case unit, focusing on who this individual was. The individual fled to Maine. He was arrested. He's serving the rest of his life in prison because of the efforts of cold case unit. So that's what we've been doing. That's what we're about. The Rape Kit initiative has resulted in cold cases being solved. Several violent sexual assaults of women committed in New Bedford that would not have been solved without us seeking the resources and funding to have these kits tested. So we've been very strong on cold cases. She's not going to solve any New Bedford highway killings. We are utilizing advanced technology and DNA. We have a 95% homicide solve rate through the combined efforts of the state police, local investigators. We're getting this job done.
Time's up, please.
And I'm very proud of that.
Time's up. Mr. Quinn gets the next question from WBSM's Kate Robinson.
How could you tackle, or do you plan to tackle, socioeconomic or racial inequalities in the cases being prosecuted?
Well, I have based my career on being fair to all people who I come in contact with in the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, there has been racial inequality and prejudice throughout the country, but it's not involved in the cases that I'm handling and overseeing. That is unacceptable to me. Each person is equal under the law and under God's eyes, and they need to be treated that way. The focus is on their conduct and their record, regardless of their race or ethnicity. So all people, it's been fundamental to me that all people need to be treated equal. Without that, the criminal justice system has no credibility. I don't see that to be the case in this county. People present themselves to a court, a judge oversees it, and There must be fair treatment of people. If a person is white or a person of color, if they're engaging in certain criminal behavior that makes them a danger to the community, they are based on their conduct and their record, not on their race. But I think it's something we have to be aware of and vigilant of. But I've based my career on being fair to all people who I come in contact with and my office comes in contact with, and I would tolerate nothing less. It's certainly a volatile issue, but I've staked my career on treating people fairly, and I haven't heard anybody say any differently.
All right, Mr. McMahon.
I think a lot of people have spoken differently about that, but first I'd like to address what my opponent has said about the rape kits. First off, I'd like to congratulate him for realizing after 12 years that over 1,100 rape kits were left untested. It should be noted that the grant for those tests has been available since 2015. But again, congratulations for figuring that out. A lot of the voters that I've spoken to when I've gone and spoken at local elections, people have said, why didn't Attorney Quinn realize it before? He's been involved in this office for 16 years. What could possibly have been more important than not figuring out there were 1,100 rape kits in 2015? In life, there are no coincidences, so it begs the question, would these kits have ever been tested if Attorney Quinn had gone unchallenged in this election? We have to ask this. In terms of what to do about equal and fair justice, that's been my platform all along, so I'm glad that it resonated with my opponent. I would say that it's absolutely imperative that you take every case by case, and analyze it, and I have vowed equal and fair justice. There are going to be times when that's a tough decision. It just is going to be. Sometimes you're going to have to be tough on police officers if they act in bad faith. This will happen sometimes, but we don't fix it unless we acknowledge that there is a problem.
Total false
All
statement
right,
about the rape kit.
you don't have a rebuttal there, Mr.
Excuse me,
Quinn.
but total false statement.
Mr. Quinn, you don't have a rebuttal there, please. The next question will be asked by Mr. Christopher Shea of Dartmouth Week for Ms. McMahon.
What are some programs you would like to have the district attorney's office implement to, further connect with the community? I'm not opposed to having more Brian Rose baseball, of course.
So I think that we should be in our schools right now. I think that the district attorney's office should absolutely be in our schools right now. The fentanyl that is going around right now is in everything. It's in marijuana, it's in cocaine, it's in heroin. We need to get to our schools and educate our youth about the dangers of what is being sold out there and how dangerous it is. I've heard about the young man in Connecticut who was 15 years old who smoked marijuana. It was laced with fentanyl and he overdosed and died. This is our priority right now. Every single voter I have spoken to since I got into this has said the number one problems facing this county is the mental health crisis and the drug crisis. We have to be in our schools.
We have been in the schools. We have had something called COVID for the last few years that has prevented people from going to schools, but I have, as I indicated, been involved in a number of community-based programs. We have partnered with Corey's Cause, a young man almost fatally overdosed after getting an athletic injury, becoming overdosed. I've been with him. He's gone to the schools to talk about the message of what could happen to you if you get addicted. I formed the Bristol Alliance that's brought partners together from all over the country, partnering with South Coast hospitals to have a unified approach to dealing with substance abuse. We just had several hundred people last month talking about these issues. I've supported, as I said, a pre-diversion program. So we've been in the schools. We have a community program there. We talk about domestic violence in the schools, important issue so young people can avoid this getting involved in abusive relationships that upend families and society, that hurt women primarily and children and stigmatize them forever. And it creates a cycle from going on. So we've been in the schools. And again, putting forth inaccurate information, false information. I don't know where she'd have any of this information, but very active in the community, balanced approach to prosecution, keep the bad people off the street, deal with the low-level offenders in a way that they can move forward, and get out in the schools and the community. Just ask the community. You think people are telling her out in the community about rape kits not being tested? It's a bunch of
Time, please,
nonsense.
Mr. Quinn. Final question of the
Complete
night.
nonsense.
The last question of the night will be asked by Kate Robinson of WBSM for Mr. Quinn.
DA Quinn, you supported Governor Baker's effort to expand who would be considered dangerous and how long they would be held for. If implemented, would that increase pressure in an already crowded system?
Not at all. I've always felt from the time I became a prosecutor that people who are dangers to the community and then commit crimes while out on release ought to be kept off the street. Any rational person would agree. I have been a leader in the state working with the governor's office to make some changes to the dangerousness statute. For example, just today in court, a man is convicted of sexually assaulting an 8-year-old. He's in his 50s. That offense, raping a child, it's a 10-year minimum mandatory. You cannot move to detain that person. Just having the opportunity asked to detain him. There's no sane or rational person who could say that's not appropriate. So I fought to have offenses like that added to the statute, working with the governor's office. There are simple solutions to it. Firearms offenses. There's guns all over the place in the wrong hands. Need to be added to that statute. So modest changes that I've advocated in that system are appropriate. I'm very disappointed that the legislature did not enact a bill that could have added offenses, including people involved in manslaughter and other fatalities. It's common sense approach. And also limiting the artificial timeframes that you have 6 months to try someone when the rule of court is 1 year. So I've been a proponent of that. It's common sense. It protects the public. It would not add to people being incarcerated. There's an agenda against that who want to see people, such as my opponent, out on the street who don't belong on the street. It's not fair to the communities. It's not fair to victims, especially women who are terrorized by people and live in fear of these individuals getting out. Many of these cases are domestic violence cases. So I was disappointed, but I'm going to continue to fight for that as the president of the District Attorneys Association and as a district attorney. It's common sense reform.
Time, please.
That makes sense.
Ms. McMahon?
This is an area where my opponent and I actually agree. I do believe in expanding the statute to cover sex cases 100%. I think that we absolutely should do this. However, it's not something that should be taken lightly. We're talking about pretrial detention with only a hearing and up until the trial date. If they need to do more research, then we should allow them to, so we can use the dangerousness hearing to the best of our ability. I would also say, having clerked for this Superior Court justices, I do know that the overuse of the dangerousness statute poses a problem. And I do know that the current administration, my opponent, has overutilized the dangerousness statute. And when you do that, you essentially turn into the boy that cried wolf. We have to use our dangerousness statute wisely, sparingly, because we're about equal and fair justice.
All right, let's now move on to the closing statements, beginning with Incumbent District Attorney Thomas Quinn.
Thank you, Paul. I've been the district attorney for almost the past 8 years, and I've been about getting the job done. You've heard me highlight some of the initiatives that I've done with a great staff, great leadership, women in top positions in the office. There's more women in leadership positions in the office than there are men, and that's been very important to me. It's been a priority to keep dangerous criminals off the street. The public has a right to be protected from them. Women, children, innocent civilians, the road to the revolving door of letting people out. What's the translation of that answer? I'm going to put more people back out on the street that don't belong there. That's my opponent. That is unacceptable to a civilized society, and the vast majority of people support that. I don't know who she's talking to, but I know who I'm talking to. People support cold case initiatives, not giving up on cases, protecting the public, being fair, but also doing what you have to do so people can live, especially in the cities, have a decent life and not be terrorized by criminals who are put back out on the street. 95% homicide solve rate. The national average is 54%, thanks to the efforts of the investigators and the state police. Well, since I've been the DA, 20% decrease in homicides, unlike what's going on around the country. as I said, we brought 18 cases to trial, homicides in the last year. Unheard of. Getting the job done. I've formed a special unit to protect seniors from fraud and abuse. They deserve to be protected. I'm protecting them. They've given so much to our communities. Fully testing all the rape kits going tonight. It's not my fault. You think people are telling her it's my fault? Bunch of baloney, okay? I did something about a problem. Women are getting justice now. Cold cases, I've spoken about it. We're not giving up. We've solved them. Serial rapists, murderers, that's what the public wants. I have a balanced approach to prosecution.
Please, Mr. Quinn.
Protecting the public, but also working with the community partners. I wanted to
Time,
continue
please,
to
Mr.
fight
Quinn.
for you as your district
Mr.
attorney
Quinn.
for the next 4 years. Give me
Mr.
that
Quinn,
chance.
time, please.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for a spirited debate tonight. We would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone for coming out here. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Thank you for, it's not as easy as it looks. Ms. McMahon.
Thank you. First off, I would like to thank my opponent for agreeing to do this forum. I got into this race because I know that Bristol County can do better. We can do better at keeping our neighborhoods safer. We can do better advocating for witnesses and victims. We can reduce recidivism with specialty courts, and we can do better with securing grant dollars for the people of Bristol County. My opponent has enjoyed 8 years of unopposed complacency. He has failed to be transparent in very important matters such as several police shootings, over 1,100 untested rape kits, languishing in his office for 12 years, and surfacing during an election year when he has an opponent, and this unicorn of a greater than 90% solve rate. Factually, it's the police who solve crime. It's the district attorney's office who prosecutes them. And just so you all know, my opponent's conviction rate for all trials in Superior Court this past year is 46%. Is that transparency? I submit to you that it is not. As your district attorney, I will work every day to keep our neighborhoods safer and aggressively prosecute the drug traffickers who are killing our citizens and children, to continue the wonderful work with our senior population initiated by Sam Sutter, and to always use an independent outside investigator if ever there is even a hint of a conflict of interest. You will never have to wonder, what have I not disclosed? This is a Democratic primary with no Republican challenger, which means whoever wins on September 6th will be your next district attorney. As you prepare to vote on September 6th, I urge you to ask yourself, do you feel safer today than you did 8 years ago when my opponent was handed this job? If the answer is no, it is imperative that you vote on September 6th for me, Shannon Mcmahon, the only true Democrat who has publicly stated numerous times that I am unequivocally pro-choice, unlike my opponent. Thank you very much for your listening and your time.
All right, I'd like to take the opportunity now to thank everyone for coming out here to view the debate in person, those watching on Dartmouth Community Media and on our YouTube channel, Dartmouth Community Media. We'd like to remind you that the state primary election is on Tuesday, September the 6th of 2022. The polls open at 7 a.m. They don't close all the way until 8 p.m., so there's no excuse not getting out to the polls. Early in-person voting is also allowed from August the 27th all the way to September the 2nd. You can also ask your town, local, or city clerk and the office there for places and times for early in-person voting. We'd also like to thank WBSM's Kate Robinson and from Dartmouth, Christopher Shea, for participating in our debate. I'm Paul Santos, your moderator. Thank you and have a great night.